At the transom, I installed a pair of these U-bolts, the same 1/2-inch stainless steel ones that I installed on the bow. It goes all the way through the outboard reinforcement pad, the corner post, and the tabbing on the inside, so that should be good and strong. For now, this is the only means I have for securing the aft end of the boat. I don't know where to put a cleat. We'll see what needs are dictated. But for now, we've got this. They're good and solid. I treated the holes with epoxy after drilling them out. Let that cure overnight, and then installed these with lots of sealant in my typical way. I've got one on each side, and I think they're pretty sturdy, and they have an ancillary purpose of bolting this outboard pad to the rest of the transom for what it's worth. This Garboard drain plug will allow me to drain the boat whenever it's on a trailer. I won't have to worry about it filling up or the pump failing or anything like that. Anytime the boat's out of the water, I'll take this plug out. It's a heavy-duty bronze plug with a 1-inch bore. I happen to have this on hand, so I used it here. I installed it as low as I could inside the transom, and the bottom of the flange is just about flush with the bottom of the boat. So it's not 100% drain, but it'll certainly keep any major water out. It's the next morning, and here's the spot for the Garboard drain. Got the 4 holes filled with epoxy. The opening with its key slot is epoxy coated. And now I'm going to put in this fitting, mark and drill and tap the holes and install it permanently. Here are the prepared holes. The top hole goes just through the thickness of the plywood transom, so you can see light through there. The other 3 holes all go into this reinforcement at the bottom, so they will not protrude through. And these are just machine screws, so I'm not going to put nuts on. The sealant will hold it and seal it, obviously, and the 4 screws are really there kind of to keep it from turning. So let's get this in. I put just a little bit of this sealant on the threads of the plug. I'm putting the plug in now because the boat's indoors. I don't need it out. But the special tool comes with it. I'll keep that with the boat. 1/2-inch ratchet drive will fit that as well. Here's my completed Garboard drain, fully installed. There's the inside. I'll clean that up a little bit. 3 of the 4 screws go into this wooden reinforcement at the bottom. Just the one on the top came through. I have to figure out how these wires lead out. So that'll all be happening soonish. This is my outboard panel. I've just created this opening up by where my battery switch is. Battery switch is right below this. And I've just made a nice little rounded opening, nothing fancy. And at some point I'm going to fashion a little cover plate that'll seal this up. Here is the outboard well cover. Dry fit in place. As you can see, I added a couple nice stainless handles at the forward edge that'll help me insert and remove it. And I've marked all the 6 locations for my bolts that are going to secure this. I wanted to do it in place so that I got it lined up right with those blocks, cleats that I installed underneath earlier. So I'm going to pre-drill for my bolts or screws. They're hex head screws with a sealing washer, kind of like a roofing screw that you use for metal roofing. And then I have a gasket to install on the cleats all the way around outside of the screw locations. And with luck, that'll seal this pretty well. We're going to see how this goes when I get it screwed down. But this is what goes there. You've seen this before, but at earlier stages, and this is the finished deal here. Over here is the little cutout that I made. You can see how these wires, this engine battery cable wire and this blue ship service wire go right through there. And my plan is some kind of a little plate that I can slide over this that seals this up even better with a couple screws just to close that off. Or maybe I'll just goop it up, I don't know. But it's a necessary evil to get these wires through there. There's no other way to do it. So that's what I've done. And I think it's fine. Again, this cover here is intended to prevent water that should backflow over this transom. It's to prevent that from actually flooding the boat. It's to keep it confined in this area to the best extent possible. There's going to be 2 drains in the corners through the transom so that it can self-drain. That's the design purpose of this. How well it functions, I don't know. Sometimes when you reverse hard or something, you can get splash over. That's really what it's about. All small outboard boats have some kind of a system like this, some kind of a drain well right in front of the outboard. And this one's no exception. So this is what's here. This is really the transom, this bulkhead right here. So that's the piece. And I'm going to take it out and drill for my bolts and Not quite ready to install it yet. I want to make sure I'm done underneath, and we'll move on. So with the outboard well cover finally fitted, secured in place, fully gasketed, it's time to drill these drain holes. Actually, it marked and drilled these earlier in the project, and they seemed like they were off. This one here, I re-drilled. Well, I filled them both with epoxy, and I just remarked and re-drilled them from the inside. This one here on the starboard side ended up in about the same place. Port side is a little lower than it was originally. I don't know why they got screwed up originally, but they did. But no harm done. And I've got these little brass inserts in there to accept the drain plug if I want. And put the flanged end on the inside. And I've left it to run long on the outside. I'll cut that off later. Wanted to cut it off first, but I couldn't figure out how to clamp that piece and cut it effectively and safely. So I figured I'd get it epoxied in place, and I'll cut that off later. These are secured with epoxy. There's epoxy coating the insides of the holes, and we'll just leave those to cure overnight or longer, and I'll cut those ends off. And these drains are to allow the outboard well cover area, the splash well, if you were, to drain overboard directly and keep the space below relatively dry. It's not going to be dry, but a little dry. So here's where we've ended up, at least so far, on cleaning up these wires and cables. I've got 2 runs of split loom covering the control cables, wiring, and the engine wiring harness. The engine wiring harness is in its own sheath, and I've left the steering cable out because there's really no reason to cover it. Could always put a split loom on it if I want. I need to do something here. The split loom's not big enough to go around these connectors, but I'd like to cover that, partly for looks, partly for protection. So I have to figure something out there. All in all, I think that looks pretty good. I wish they were completely invisible, obviously, but they're not. And as long as it looks neat and intentional, I'm okay with it. So I've got to run a hose for that bilge pump. I think I'm probably just going to run it out over here underneath this, and then up to a through hole in the side of the boat on the other side of the bulkhead somewhere. Just something that works, as straight and simple as possible. I can't come out back here because it just complicates with this outboard well cover that goes in here. I want to avoid the wire harnesses and all that, so I'm going to go just below that. Looks like about 9 inches down from the very top to the center, from the top of that trim. And there's my mark. And then I've coated the interior at the opening with epoxy. It'll tape over both sides just in case a little stray drip wants to come out when I'm not paying attention. So we'll let that kick enough, and then I'll install the through hull. So that wraps up the bilge pump plumbing. I've installed the through the hull. Huh, how about that? Bet you never saw that coming. There's the outside. It's just a simple plastic through hull. And the standard cheap plastic bilge hose. And that runs back to the pump, which we already know works. At this end, I still have hookups to do at the outboard. So this is where it stands for now. I have put a nice cable clamp there. These are the battery harness from the engine and my 12-volt wire that leads up to the helm come down here, and they go through the slot in the outboard well cover and down to the battery switch and so forth. Here on the little tiny foredeck, I've prepared bolt holes for this cleat. I marked and over drilled those holes, filled them with epoxy, taped over from the bottom side. It never got painted. How about that? And we'll let that cure overnight, and then I can drill for the final size of the bolts required on this cleat and get this cleat installed. That epoxy is cured overnight. I've just drilled and tapped these holes for 5/16 inch fasteners. I'm going to use these 5/16 bronze bolts. I only have 3-inch long on hand. They'll be way too long here, but this is what I have. So it's bronze to go with the bronze cleat. So those holes are all prepped. It's time for sealant. Get this installed. I've also made a backing plate out of fiberglass in addition to the nuts and washers. After installation, lots of squeeze out. And underneath, backing plate and large washers. I'll cut that excess bolt length off later. And there's the bow cleat, completely installed. Nice size bow cleat. For now, I'm just installing this cleat. I really don't know what to do about cleats back here for docking. I think for the short term, we'll just use the rings, because there's really nowhere appropriate for cleats. There might be something later that I can add, but the reality is we're going to put this boat on a lift. We've decided to put a boat lift at the dock. So the boat's not going to be tied up. It's going to be sitting on a lift, which is going to be better in all kinds of ways. We'll go into that more in a minute, or later, I guess, not in a minute, literally. So with other work winding down, and after delaying this probably longer than I should, it's time to get some varnish going on all this wood. I masked off everything earlier, but I just haven't had a chance to get to it. But here we are. This is one coat on the upper deck trim, and I think 4 or 5 on the gunnel. So we're going to call it 4 since I can't remember. So it's a sealer coat on the upper trim, heavily thinned, and regular varnish, unthinned on the bottom, on the gunnel. And I want at least 6 coats on everything before it leaves the shop. So it'll take me a week sanding between every coat. And more is better if I can do it. But minimum 6. Between coats, it's just a light sanding by hand with 320 grit, just to haze up the surface like this. Remove the gloss. This is the gunnel, which currently has at least 4 coats on it that I'm sanding. Up here, the deck edge trim and cockpit trim has currently 1 coat that I've already sanded. Again, very light. Don't go crazy on the corners because I don't want to sand through it. This is all it is. It takes 15 minutes or so to sand. Coat 5 on the gunnel, coat 2 on the upper trim. Varnish continues with the 6th coat on the gunnels, 3rd coat on the top trim. Varnish continues. This is 7 on the gunnels, 4 on the top trim. This is 8 coats on the gunnels, 5 coats on the upper level trim. So after 6 or 7 days in a row doing varnish coats at the end of every day, I'm calling the varnish, quote, done for now. There's no such thing as a last coat of varnish, but I've got 8 coats on this gunnel, 6 coats on the rest of the trim, and that's enough for right now. And there will be time for more coats later. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this masking tape and see how this all looks. Here in the cockpit, here's a look at the cockpit edge trim, or combings, whatever you want to call them. Varnished, tape removed, looking pretty good. And 6 coats on that trim right now. One piece of tape right there. And that's enough for right now. I'll do more at some point later this year. And up here along the deck edge, it's looking real nice. This is probably going to be a tough edge to maintain, but that's okay. It looks good, and I'll just varnish it as needed. All the way up to the bow. And back down the port side. With it all unmasked, here is how we look with the brightwork. Looks nice, always does when it's brand new. I'll probably be sorry I have this, but it looks good. I'll do my best to maintain it. It just offsets the boat well. Gotta have some bright wood. It's 8 coats on the gunnels, 6 coats on the top trim. I always consider 6 the bare minimum. It's good for a season, kind of. It's enough to treat the bare wood, but you can't rest on that laurel very long because you need more coats than that. So this will probably get another coat or 2 later this year after we're done with the boat, sometime in the fall. But for right now, it's good. And I'm happy with it. Looks great. Really dresses the boat up.